Welcome back, Particle People. We are in Once Human once more, and today we're going to be discussing the entire game. As of time of recording, I have 600 hours in the game. Fair warning to all of those watching right now, this video is not going to have nearly as many flashy transitions or be as video-driven as my previous. This is going to be more of me just talking about Once Human in general, so feel free to put this on in the background while you're cooking, cleaning, or playing Once Human. Do whatever you gotta do. This is going to be more of a talking piece. And with that disclaimer out of the way, what exactly are we going to be talking about today? Well, I'm glad you didn't ask, because today we're going to be discussing every aspect that I ever had a thought about when it comes to Once Human, because I've been playing for 600 hours. God, I will never get that time back. That's like more than a dozen work weeks into this game, so I think I have some opinions, I have some thoughts, and I think I have enough experience in order to voice them with some level of authority. So let's dive right in, and I'm going to start with the gameplay. The basic gameplay of Once Human, let's just agree, it's fantastic. Everything you can do in the game, from your initial guns and shooting, your crossbow, and your deviations are, well, they're phenomenal. I believe the basic mechanics that they set up for us to use here are very well baked with a lot of time and thought put into them. For a free game, if you wanted to download this today, even if you haven't played before, I can assure you you will have some fun, because even though some of the early areas are way too easy on a basic server and even on the hard servers, it just does feel good. It feels polished. All of your attacks feel like they mean something. You have really cool finishing moves when it comes to melee. Headshots are very rewarding, and your deviations can certainly turn the tides of battle in both PvE and PvP scenarios. So there's no part about the basic systems that is not serviceable, at least. However, that's not to say there's not room for improvement. One of these basic systems that needs to be improved is when it comes to PvP, because right now the servers have no ability to handle high latency or large amounts of people in one area. If you try to have a PvP brawl with, let's say, more than 6 people, you're most likely going to start lagging and have a terrible experience. And that's not to say that the gunplay isn't good. You could definitely have fun in PvP if the servers could support it. And then moving on to another thing that needs to be advanced or tweaked a little bit, in my opinion, is the deviations themselves. They are really cool and a lot of them are very unique. However, I think that each of these deviants that we have aren't really standing out. They all kind of are one-dimensional, and I would love to see this system expanded further. I don't know, perhaps we can have something where the deviations roles are more extended, or if there's more things that we can do with them rather than just putting them in a box and having them be essentially resource generators or a combat buddy that lasts for about 30 seconds. So now that we've discussed the core mechanics, at least of combat, let's talk about how we learned about those core mechanics, being the AI assistant and the tutorial. And oh boy, that tutorial is something. I think it does do a good job of teaching you a few things, but oh my god, is it an info dump. It is literally telling you to read paragraphs at a time just so you can do a little bit more gameplay to get to another massive paragraph. I honestly did not enjoy any part of the tutorial. While I did get to max level on a character about 6 times here, I've done the tutorial about 4 times now, and I can honestly say it needs some improvement. If you are new to the game and don't feel like reading lots and lots of paragraphs regarding the gameplay itself, I highly suggest finding a YouTuber or a Twitch streamer who plays the game frequently and watching them to get the basics. While the translation team has gotten a lot better in the recent days, for English that is, a lot of these things aren't very clear and are better learned by watching someone else do them or just simply by experimenting yourself. I hate a lot of these info dumps. They also introduced an AI assistant, which is supposed to give you helpful tips as you're exploring the world, and I can honestly tell you it is the most pain in the ass system I've ever seen in my life. No, I do not want to stop randomly because you said I need to learn something, and I do not need you to launch a secondary window to read it. Just remove the AI assistant entirely. It's useless. But once you do have the core mechanics down, you're introduced to another mechanic, which is your base building, which is surprisingly impactful for this game. Your base can be used with your deviations and a whole bunch of gardening equipment to do pretty much whatever you would like. If you want to optimize base defense, go right ahead. They've got turrets. You want to grow everything in the world? Cool. Put up a whole bunch of plant boxes. Did you decide that you wanted to tame bears? Well, you can do that too for some reason. I'm not sure why we can tame bears, but we totally can. I initially would have had some negative things to say about the base building. However, in recent patches, a lot of the bugs that they had have been worked out, and the snap to grid system has been improved so dramatically I have nothing negative to say. At least from my personal experience. From what I understand, people are still managing to exploit the building system to do some silly things like stack floors so you can't bust into a base in PvP, but I haven't seen that too much personally. So now that you're out in the world, you've got your shooty bits and your deviation bits as well as a base bit. What do we do from here? Well, that's where we have to partake in the story. You are a Mayfly and you have to work to stop evil Rosetta, which apparently also has 2 factions inside, one being more evil than the other, and we need to go ahead and stop the super bad one and Mary and all of her shenanigans. That is not canon to Prism vs. Clash, but we'll talk about that later in the video. So overall, with everything that I know currently about Once Human, how does the story stack up? I mean, it's incredibly mid, and that's not to say it's a bad thing, it's just really middle of the road. If I was reading a book with this story, I would have given up about 1 or 2 chapters in. It doesn't really do anything to grip you, and it's very predictable. Mary looks like a Resident Evil antagonist, and I don't know a single person who didn't call her as being evil from the moment we met her. Not to mention, some of the story just doesn't really track to what's going on in the game itself. Like, there's a point where you're helping escort Mary into the first boss area, and then she goes, "I'm so glad you made it." It's like, we made it here together. Did you forget that I just escorted you in here? So at least the story for Manibus has a lot to be desired. It's okay, it's serviceable. It's enough to keep you mildly interested, I suppose, but I think the general aesthetic of the world is going to do a lot better job of keeping you interested than the story ever could. I'm sure I'm going to catch flack for this in the comments, but just hear me out. It is terribly hard to fuck up a eldritch horror story, okay? We have all of these crazy entities, monsters that have suitcases for heads, 3-limbed tripods that throw exploding gas bags at you, a corrupted world that is slowly draining your sanity while monsters come at you from every angle, and your main antagonist is Mary. And even though you're fighting actual monsters, your biggest antagonist is Mary and her group of guys with guns as they slowly try to make monsters, but they're much slower and worse at it. This could have been so compelling if at the time when Mary double crosses you for the first time in the game, her face like splits open and reveals that she's some kind of eldritch horror too. I feel like they just don't want to compromise Mary's image because she's used in so much of the marketing, but she's not intimidating. The worst that she really does on screen for us is float away, and that's just, all I'm saying is if I'm in a Lovecraftian environment, I want all of the human-esque enemies to become monstrous-esque enemies by the second act, okay? Is that too much to ask? I know that every story wants to go for, well, humans were the real monsters the whole time, but there are actual monsters here. Can we just focus on them a bit more? Hopefully, the next scenario will see that a bit, but I don't think so. So now that we have the basics out of the way, what is it like to level up in Once Human? And I gotta say, it's pretty smooth. It's very easy to move from one zone to the next, and if you're one of those people who wants to power level, there are many options for you. As you level up, you'll get access to even more powerful equipment and amazing perks that will augment the way you play the game, and these things are so impactful, and if you team up with other people, you could really make an impact on how you do everything. The fact that you keep getting new things makes each level feel awesome, and you feel really motivated to get to the next 5 levels where you gain another perk, or you get access to the new tier of equipment, and also the fact that you can't get all of the perks encourages social gameplay, meaning you have to work together, which is perfect for an MMORPG. What I would say is leveling up feels a little bit undermined by the fact that the enemies are just so easy to fell on average. Even on hard mode servers, if you're fighting something that's even remotely close to your level and you're not super under-geared, you're going to have absolutely no problem wiping the floor with it. And I understand there has to be a certain level of accessibility here for your average player so they don't get stomped if they're new or learning or not very good, and that's perfectly fine. And I love that they added the hard service, but can you do me one better? Can you add a nightmare server where everything is hell, please? Unfortunately, there is a subsection of gamer out there, I'm included in this group, which are just masochists, and we want everything to be a real grind and be incredibly painful. I know that's not everybody, so this is just a personal critique, but can we please have something that makes me want to rip my own teeth out? Gaming isn't always about fun. I can tell you from firsthand, I've played League of Legends for about a decade, so I can tell you, sometimes it's just about the pain and we love it. That says more about me than the game itself, doesn't it? However, looping back to the first server and leveling up as a topic, let's talk about the bosses really quickly. And this is another area where I just have to say, Once Human, wonderful job with your boss design. All of them, with the exception of the Treant, are absolutely riveting. I still remember being on the server when the Shadowhound became live and people could fight it for the first time. It was an amazing experience. I am so excited for the new scenario to see if I can have another moment like that, because people were losing their minds. And the very same excitement happened a second time when the final boss became available, and that one was tinted with a bit of frustration as a lot of people couldn't figure out how to beat it on their first attempt. These bosses were absolutely amazing, and the implementation of such was also equally fantastic. I love the time wall. I love that while you're in the game they can become available and people can zerg to try to get to them. I love the open discussion that's encouraged because everybody's trying to figure it out. Wonderful job. When it comes to the Primor versions of these bosses, I think they're a little bit underbaked and a little bit too easy because people became way too prepared very quickly, I might add, to all of those challenges. They really became just a stomp. But when we get to fight the Manibus by ourselves, I gotta say that's a fun challenge too, trying to hit the weak spots while a flood of monsters is coming at you. Now that's the eldritch horror I've been looking for. This handsy tentacle monster is a much better antagonist than Mary ever was. I do not care if she brought this into the existence. I do not care that she's related. Get Mary out of here. Give me more of these handsy tentacle monsters. I know how that sounds. Trust me, it's not pervy. Now that we've talked about a little bit more of the leveling experience, including the bosses and the basic perks and such, we do have to tackle the equipment inside of the game, which I think the way you gear yourself in this game is a little bit confusing for new players, and not to mention the long-term goal of getting better gear is a little bit obfuscated. In case you didn't know, you can use a currency known as Starcrom to get blueprints for gear that you can build at your workbench in one of 5 grades. Getting duplicate blueprints allows you to upgrade your blueprint, and so it can be even more powerful when you construct it in the future. Now you can gamble at this little slot machine thing that looks like an arcade in order to try to get blueprints at random, or you can save up even more currency and buy the exact blueprint you're looking for, assuming you're trying to put together some build you put together in your head. I know I didn't explain that super well there, but if you're looking for a video on how to make a perfect build no matter what you're trying to do, please follow the link in the description, as I've already covered that in a previous video. I digress. These blueprints are how you obtain your gear that you'll be able to freely repair. However, you can also find gear drops in the world that you can use until it breaks. You can try to maintain it by using an artisan's touch deviation, which you can find in the world from certain enemies. However, it's harder to do than you'd expect, and not to mention, once it's gone, it's gone. You can't take it with you to another scenario. The dropped gear, that is. You can bring all of your deviations between scenarios. And that's not even to mention that most of the gear you're going to be wanting to build is very cookie cutter. If a gun does one thing, you're most likely going to want the gear that goes to the corresponding thing. There's very little wiggle room for build diversity. And usually, once you have the build you're going for on a character, you're not going to deviate from it too much, because Starcrom is so hard to find that getting a whole nother set just isn't worth it. You'd rather upgrade your first set. So with my psychobabble out of the way there, I can say that the equipment system definitely needs some work. It feels like it's not really player friendly at a certain point, relying on chance so much. Maybe you can make it where you can kind of earn blueprints slowly over time by using dropped equipment. Hear me out. What if there was a system where if by killing enemies of your level or greater with dropped equipment, you can slowly earn one blueprint piece here, one blueprint piece there, up until the point where you have the base blueprint? Seems like a good idea to me. You get more players grinding more mobs trying to unlock their favorite blueprints, which increases player retention, and players get to unlock the weapons they actually want without having to gamble or grind their asses off for over a week in order to get a full set. But hey, maybe that's just the opinions of a ranting madman. Moving a bit further into the equipment system, you can also get mods for your armor and for your weapons, which make them better at certain aspects of what they do. Sometimes they influence keywords, sometimes they'll just give you additional damage. This system isn't inherently bad, although it is incredibly difficult to find the mod you're looking for, at least to as perfect of a quality as you would like. This is kind of where the infinite replay comes from, as you will farm bosses over and over and over trying to find better mods. And I honestly do enjoy grinding for a good mod. I feel very accomplished when I find one that's even just a percent better than the previous that I had, so I'd have to say that this system is pretty okay. It's fairly serviceable. Overall, the equipment system is alright. I'd say it's good enough for a free game. However, I'd like to see it expanded in depth and maybe add some more weapon options in the future, not just the katana. We need some more firepower, which I almost feel like we're guaranteed to get in the upcoming expansion, just given some of the information that I could see from the trailer. I could be wrong. It definitely looked like there were some new weapon type things going on there. Before we leave this scenario and talk about things beyond the base game that we've been supplied with for the first 2 scenarios, let's talk about the world itself that we get to explore in those first areas. And this is another area where Once Human absolutely knocks it out of the park. The world that we get to explore is so filled with so many various areas that have different creatures, different surprises, different treasures. Sprinkle in some hidden bosses here and there with some cool loot drops, as well as some deviations that you can capture at your leisure. Perhaps you found a honeybee, and that's super helpful. The world just feels alive, and this is something that a lot of MMOs really struggle with. A giant world with many things to do, however the world itself feels barren. Luckily, this is not an area that Once Human struggles with at all. No matter what you're looking to do, whether you want to go fishing, hunting, looking for a deviation, fighting some bosses, there is never a dull moment. If you can think of it, you can probably do it within the borders of the game. Not to mention, you can find cosmetics for your base in the world itself. By raiding lockers, you can find different pieces of furniture or blueprints for those furniture, which can sell for the big money. And while I would like to see this expanded for cosmetics for your player as well, not just for furniture and building materials, I do think this is a wonderful start, especially for a game that hasn't even been out for a full year yet. And I can guarantee, just based off of the things that we can build ourselves, we're gonna get some cool ass cosmetics going into the next expansion, because think about the heat and the cold, there's gotta be different building archetypes there. With all of that said, I think we can say with a high degree of certainty that the first scenario that we had, both PvP and PvE versions, have been a huge success and were wonderful experiences for every player involved. Well, maybe not every player, obviously it's not everyone's cup of tea, but you know, I think it was a pretty good time for most of us. With that said, it's time to talk about Prismverse for a moment. moment because I believe that's Once Human's biggest misstep so far. And that's not to say if you're enjoying Prismverse that you are in the wrong or shouldn't be. I'm very happy for you. In fact, I think that there's a lot of fun opportunities to be had in that game mode. However, let's admit that it's rushed. After establishing an amazing first scenario like Manibus, to go to something which is roughly a modded version of the same scenario and call it its own scenario with very few gimmicks, it's really disappointing. The Thomas the Tank Engine mod for Skyrim has more effort put into it than the Prismverse scenario. The story, the location, the messed up level scaling, the inconsistent PvP battles, the attempts to catch these Prism variations, the fact that the servers they're using couldn't even handle most of the PvP battles that occurred, everything about it has just been a rushed cop job of assets they already had, trying to make something out of nothing and telling players to go entertain themselves. And there's nothing wrong with player-created content. In fact, I love massive PvP battles that are orchestrated in other games like World of Warcraft. The two factions would just go at it at a scheduled time because the players wanted to. That's super awesome. I love that. But this half-assed attempt in order to kind of orchestrate this with some deviations which are supposed to be special, the only one that's notable, by the way, is Berserkosaurus Rex, and then you call this one special thing an entire scenario and put that toe-to-toe with Manibus that you just made, which is a masterpiece, that makes it look like you just don't care. You're leaning on a player base to make fun content for you because honestly, holding a Prism deviation for no less than 30 minutes to try to capture it while no one is coming and attacking you is the most boring thing you could possibly do. And lordy, trust me, I tried, because I joined hives, I joined warbands, I tried to orchestrate these big plays, and the same thing happens every single time. You'll get the deviation, you'll stomp out the opposition, they'll give up and they'll leave. Then you're done. It's typically like 5 minutes of fun no matter how much effort you put into it. If you're going to design a PvP scenario in the future, please stay away from all of the mistakes you made with Prismverse, as this was a half-baked piece of garbage. I am happy for the people who enjoyed it, however, it's up to you to make fun scenarios for the people, not for the people to join the scenarios and have to orchestrate it themselves. Take a note from World of Warcraft and do something like a battleground fighting for a deviation where a bunch of people are pinned in for a certain amount of time and one group will emerge victorious. That would work out a lot better. And while I do absolutely loathe Prismverse, I can understand missteps do happen. As long as the upcoming scenario isn't too bad, I'm sure I'll have a great time again. For full transparency, even though I have 600 hours on this game, I haven't really touched it in the last week because my main character is stuck in a Prismverse scenario and it's not fun. There's no fun to be had for me. Now that I'm done crying about the Prismverse scenario, let's talk about the overarching systems, because I know this is where the game lost a lot of traction, especially amongst people who have not played it. And the first one is capping progression inside of a scenario as each act unfolds and more things become available. This is absolutely brilliant. Not everyone has as much time on their hands to play this video game as much as I do, so it's great that we cap it and give everybody some time before we move to the next phase, before new, more powerful things become available and the people get left behind. The world doesn't become incredibly stale in the 1 week we have to wait for a new scenario piece to open up, so it's very fun to just see what you can do inside of those limitations. And I definitely find it hilarious when I see a bunch of people who are farming salt for that experience and just trying to get to max level in the first phase. That's hilarious. It really does stop people from zerging to the very end, and since people like me have no self-control, we'd burn ourselves out if we were able to do that. You're kind of forcing us to like the game more because we have to pace ourselves. We can't burn ourselves out as easily. I'd say that this system was implemented perfectly. Well done, Once Human. And now let's talk about the one that absolutely still plagues me as a content creator for this game to this day, which is the server wipes. If you're outside of this game and you have not played Once Human, please do not assume how the server wipes work, because so many people are just so misinformed, it's hilarious. I have a YouTube short talking about farming a shiny deviation, and I gotta tell you, I'm getting comments just about every day where somebody will say something like, "Why are you even trying to farm that? It's going to disappear when the server gets wiped. Imagine finding it and then the server wipes." So to the two of you out there not familiar with how these wipes work, you're going to be able to take all of your deviations with you. You can even take your weapon with you if you want to, as well as your blueprints will stay forever as well. Your basic resources can be stored and some of them can be brought with you based off of the amount of points that you have to translate gear over to your new server. And while your base will be destroyed and deleted, you will keep the blueprint of your base, so as soon as you have the resources, you can press 2 buttons and it will rebuild itself on your new server. You even get a pocket dimension that stores just about about everything that's not server specific, and everything you build there is permanent. So yes, you will be unable to bring everything with you from the previous scenario, but limiting what you can bring in protects the in-game economy and allows you to have replayability. And you can decide what deviations you want to bring with you. They're not that expensive, so you can bring a whole bunch and they can really impact the scenario. Or you can decide to bring a big-ass electric drill because you don't want to use the basic tools. That's fine too. Hell, if you're in a PvP scenario and you just want to kill people really quickly, bring your exact same gun from the previous server, level up to the point where you can use it, and there you go, you've got it. You may not be able to repair it super easily, but you've got it. This entire system protects Once Human from disappearing like so many MMOs do, because you're going to get to the end game so quickly, you're going to burn yourself out and you'll have nothing to do. This system will continuously reset, which means people are going to get new goals, new stuff to find, all the time. And they keep updating the scenarios too, like they did when they entered Shiny Deviations. If you kept everything permanently, there would be no challenge left in the game unless they had to power creep everything to oblivion, which is unfun for new players. I believe personally that this system is absolutely genius and we're going to see it integrated into new MMOs moving forward. It's great. And if you really don't like this system, don't think I don't understand where you're coming from, because I get it. As a human, we want everything to be permanent, but nothing is. Try to embrace the change, and trust me, it's super good for the game. Now that we've talked about one of the overarching systems that I'm a huge fan of, let's talk about an overarching system that I absolutely hate. The hyper monetization of cosmetic loot boxes has gone absolutely rampant in Once Human. Seems like every 2 weeks they're launching a brand new cosmetic loot box, which is going to have some absurdly rare prizes you'd have to spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to reliably get. And I don't really care that much because it is a cosmetic system. It would just be really nice if you put these things in the game shop directly so people could know what they're buying instead of having to gamble for like a less than 1% chance to get a cool car cosmetic. Maybe just chill out with the loot boxes a little bit, makes you look like a money-hungry vampire less than a game developer. I understand you are developing a great game, and I am a huge fan, but public reception to this is not going to be good. I also think that Once Human struggles to have this idea of rarity in their game because they like to make sure that everybody can get everything as long as it's not a paid product, which I feel like is kind of weird. I feel like in an MMORPG you want to have things that you can grind for that are rare. However, most of this is just going to be my opinion here, and overall I do think that Once Human is a fantastic game, and this next scenario is really going to make or break my perception of them moving forward because of how much I hated Prismverse. But hopefully they pull it together in this upcoming snow-themed Wonderland. Maybe it'll be fantastic. So now that I've ranted at you for about 20 minutes about everything I could think to say about Once Human, the real question is it worth your time? It's an obvious yes. This game is definitely one of the best free-to-play games you can get right now. If you haven't played, go ahead and give it a try. Don't let a lot of the negative things people have said about the server wipe scare you away. Trust me, it's not that bad. The developers may be a little misguided at times, but they are 100% listening to feedback constantly. The amount of bug fixes that we get on a regular basis and patches to the game is insane. The level of quality is pretty high, all things considered. And it's free to play, and there is no pay to win. So everyone is on an equal playing field. You'll have a great time. It's free, looking to blow a few hours. Definitely give Once Human a try. Don't put 600 hours on it. That may be excessive. I may have a problem. But what do you think about Once Human? Did I miss something that I should have talked about in this video? Perhaps a sticking point that's a make or break thing for you? Do you agree with the points that I had to say? Do you like sand, or is it too coarse and it gets everywhere? Let me know in the comments. As always, this is Sand for Days. I'm coarse and I get everywhere. Bye bye now.